Hey guys, what's up? Mike here. Thanks for tuning in to this video. So in this video, I want to share with you exact things and words to say while you're in a UI UX design interview, or if you're interviewing for a product designer or UI UX design job. Somebody sent me this topic, shot me an email, said, Mike, can you speak on the exact words and things we should say within the interview? I thought this was a great topic. I have touched on some of these things in the past in a video that I did, like called interviewing tips or whatever. But since I'm on the topic of like landing a UI UX design job, I think it's a great topic and something to expand on. So I'm gonna try to share some words and things that you should say and bring up while you're interviewing for a UI UX design job. My last video, I sort of talked about folks that may be struggling landing a job and sort of gave some words of advice and some motivation and things like that. But I didn't go into detail into exactly what things you should bring up in an interview and what you should say that can benefit you if you're in an interview. The reason why I do this is one of the best things that I ever get is when I get emails from people and that tell me that my videos on YouTube, something that they took away from it, helped them land a job. It's like, that's some of the best feelings in the world. I just recently got an email from a 22-year-old saying, you know, Mike, I know you're not gonna respond to my email, but thank you so much. Your tips have led me to having confidence and going, and you know, what I learned from your videos, you know, it helped me land a job, and that is like some of the best stuff. So listen, whatever I say in this video, you have my permission to use my words verbatim. You can rip it off. Please take notes, watch the video over and over again. Anything that I say in this video, use them in your interview, okay? You have my full permission to rip off everything that I'm gonna give you right now in this interview. I mean, in this video. So I actually wrote some notes out so I can touch on these points. And in trying to come up with this idea for this video, it's really hard to really give you the exact blueprint of an interview, because sometimes interviews take a life of their own, right? Sometimes you mesh well and you guys are just talking, and you're just talking about other stuff. You're talking about favorite restaurants and sports and all that stuff, and then you a little bit talk about some of the work that you've done. So it depends, but I'm gonna list 3 things that you should bring up at some point in an interview, and how you should, you know, some things you can phrase, and just, you know, this is how I've done things, so take this and use it, apply it to your interview. What I normally do, the first thing is when you get in an interview, they always ask me, you know, or they always ask you to tell us about yourself, right? And, you know, a lot of times that's a common interview question. Hey, you know, Mike, hey, tell me about yourself, you know? And so I've gotten that a lot in interviews, okay? So the way I like to approach it is I like to touch on the fact that I first got into this because I was a designer. I loved graphic design. I loved creating things. I loved designing things. And so you tell them about your early background as a web designer, okay? I got started by doing mom and pop shops and doing, you know, graphic design, doing brochures and flyers and things like that. And then I started to build websites on my own, and I taught myself, you know, HTML and CSS and things like that, right? You quickly talk about those things. But here's the key, okay? Remember, you're in a UI UX design interview. You're interviewing for a UX design job or a product designer job, okay? You want to briefly touch on your background on how you got started, but here's the kicker. You want to pinpoint a transition of your mindset into becoming a UX designer, okay? So what I like to say, and this is true for me, I say around 2006 is when I really started to understand the UX design process and the importance of user-centered design, okay? Use those words. At some point, you want to pinpoint a moment in your career where you've started to understand the value of user-centered design and started to approach everything in that fashion. What do I mean by user-centered design? Without going into detail, user-centered design is basically designing everything based on what you know about the user and their needs, okay? UX designers, I know for myself, if I'm hearing that from someone, that's gold, right? I know that now this person is now thinking a little bit deeper than just being a UI designer. This person is thinking about designing screens, designing apps, designing websites from a user-centered perspective. And all that means in layman terms, and you can Google the term user-centered design and find out more stuff about it, but basically what this means is before I design anything, before I even move a pixel in my design tool, I want to find out what the user needs are, okay? And we'll talk about some of this later on, and I'll point you to a link. You can learn my UX design process. So that's it. And then so at that point, you're now focused. Now you're turning the interview into your understanding of UX design, and you're not focusing on visual UI design. Okay, let's just assume you've come into this interview and you have a great portfolio, right? You have great work. Your focus now is letting them know that, hey, I can design from a user-centered perspective, okay? So use those words, key words, user-centered design, okay? So that's the number one thing. Okay, number two, sometimes this comes up at some point, you know, talk about your experience in working in a team. I think this is vital when you're trying to get a job in a corporate environment, but your experience and how you work within a team, and your experience working with developers or QA and product owners, okay? So what I like to do, what I like to point on is the fact that, I'll touch on the fact that, you know, I'm a great team player. What I like to do is I build strong relationships with everyone on the team, QA, developers, product owners, and I like to, let's say I'm talking to somebody, say I like to build relationships and not approach projects in a dictatorship fashion. What I mean is there's constant communication between myself, development. I listen to their feedback, they listen to mine, I listen to product owners' feedback, they listen to mine, I listen to QA. So I don't go in and say, I'm the UX designer, I'm right, do this or else, because that will quickly escalate into a negative relationship and things won't go well. But if you leave it open, you let development and engineers kind of give you feedback on things that we can change within the UI design. Those are the type of things that, that's how I like to approach things, okay? Yeah, so constant communication, exactly what I just said. You know, constant communication between myself, developers, and product owners to make sure that we're all on the same page. There's no dictatorship going on. So I'm not just saying, product owners, give me requirements and leave me alone and let me come up with the answers. Though that's the case that you might want to get to, but you want to leave it open so that everyone can discuss the designs and everyone's working well together. So if you can say something along those lines, that's gold. I mean, if I'm hearing this from somebody, I know that this person is an amazing person to work with and he gets it. The last thing about working with developers, and this is what I like to bring up, and this is very true in the real world, is that every developer has their own process. So me as a UX designer, I try to understand how they like to work. I ask the developers, how do you like me to deliver screens to you? How do you normally work? You know, what's your experience working with other UX designers? And that's how I like to approach things, and I think that goes well. And I think if you can say things like that in an interview, and that's gold. Lastly, at some point, is to talk about your understanding and your understanding of the UX design process, okay? Which means step one, identifying the requirements, okay? Normally you have a kickoff meeting with product owners. In some cases you gather, research is gathered for you and you identify the requirements. Number two is create use cases based on those requirements, okay? And from those use cases, you're gonna build task flows, okay? And from those task flows, you're gonna then, number 3, go into wireframing and mocking up, you know, either low fidelity designs or high fidelity, however you like to work. Okay, from that, you prototype, and then you get feedback from your stakeholders. Okay, once you and your stakeholders are somewhat okay with this best guess of an approach, then you work with your UX researchers to do some usability studies with real clients. Again, usability studies is optional. I'll talk about this in another video. Not everything that you have to test with real users. Some things can be put out there and you can iterate on, okay? But after you do some usability studies, if you have those resources available to you, you then iterate on the feedback, and then you deliver to development to get those developed, and they work within their sprint cycles to get the stuff complete. That in a nutshell, if you can touch on these things in your interview, I think you hit all the key points among other things, okay? Lastly, like I always talk about, sell yourself. Tell them you really want this job, you're excited about this, and then, you know, go from there, all right? If you wanna learn more about my UX design process, I'll put a link. Actually, just go to my website, mlwebco.com, and type in your email if you haven't already. In that first box on the homepage, I'll send you a link to my UX design process that will help you out. That's all. Review this video, play it over again, use these words in your interview, and I think this will put you in a great place. All right, thanks for watching. We'll talk soon, guys. Peace.